And good afternoon and welcome. My name is Ryan Belmore. I am the owner and publisher of What's Up Newt. It is Tuesday, October 18th. We are just one day away from early voting here in the state of Rhode Island, and we are just 3 weeks away from the general election. Vote.ri.gov is where you are going to go, and you're going to find out your polling place. You're going to view your sample ballot, and there are all sorts of surprises on that sample ballot that you might not be aware of. But there's a lot of candidates for a lot of seats. So you want to make sure you get on there before you go and vote. Look at the names that you're going to be voting on, as well as flip that over. There are a variety of statewide issues as well as local issues. Vote.ri.gov. You can find out where you can vote early. You can find out about voting by mail ballot. You can find out about voting on November 8th. We are continuing our conversations with the candidates. We have been doing dozens of these already this month, and we have 2 weeks left to go, thankfully. But chatting with candidates from local school committees all the way up to congressional districts, the governor, lieutenant governor, and et cetera. And today we are over in Senate District 11, and Mr. Frank Prozich joins me here, as well as the candidate, Linda Ujifusa. And how are you?
Great, Frank. Thanks so much for joining us, Ryan.
And Linda,
great to have you.
Linda and I have done this before. Linda was on Portsmouth Town Council for a while, and now she's running for Senate District 11. So let's start with, Linda, why you chose to make the big, scary jump.
Well, I think that there are a lot of issues that have to be dealt with at the state level, and I believe that I am the strongest candidate to do that. And with my background as a private sector and U.S. Environmental Protection Agency attorney, and now a 3-term Portsmouth Town Council member, and I've been vice president for the last 4 years. I'm also a parent of 3 graduates of Portsmouth Public Schools, John, Katie, and Jamie Ryan. And I have been a leader in nonprofits that have stood up for important public interest concerns. And I will stand up for those priorities that matter to my constituents. So frankly, I believe I am the strongest candidate, and I can do the best job for my constituents. And that's why I want to make that jump.
Before I kick it over to Frank for a question here, can you help people who are watching right now understand if they live in Senate District 11? Because some of these Senate districts are not easy to understand where they are.
Right. My district includes all of Portsmouth and Bristol, from the bridge to the high school, and then from Metacom over to the water, approximately. There's a little bit of a jag at the top and on the side, but that's generally the district. And I feel I've walked many of those streets now in Bristol to familiarize myself, and it is a beautiful community, as is Portsmouth. And we share a lot of the same issues, since we are both coastal communities. And I appreciate the ability to focus on the issues that matter because of the similarity of the districts.
I wanted to ask about reproductive rights and why that's important in this election. The Republican gubernatorial candidate says it's a done deal, it's not an issue, but that's not correct. And especially if there is a changeover in the House in Washington.
That's right. And I, want to say up front that I am 100% pro-choice. And that said, I also want to clarify that it is somewhat confusing for folks to portray themselves as pro-life, because I feel most of the time when that phrase is used, it's very much made too narrow. I think people can be pro-life in many ways beyond simply being in many ways beyond just being pro-birth. I've been working on advocating for universal health care that's comprehensive and affordable. And I believe that that is another way to ensure that your people's lives are protected, and as well as being in favor of helping make sure that people are, including children, are housed, have adequate food, have and are able to have an adequate education. There are things that make you pro-life, and I put that in quotes, that are frankly dismissed by people who very narrowly define the pro-life term. And so I believe I have testified in favor of the EACA, equal access to abortion care. And I do feel that that issue will come up again, especially, and not only that issue, but many, many issues will be coming up at the state level because of the aggressive position that our Supreme Court has taken. And we need strong legislators at the state level to not only protect choice, but also to ensure that our environmental laws are protected, that our gun safety laws are protected. And so it's vitally important in this election to make sure you have the strongest candidate placed at the State House.
Linda, you mentioned that you have been walking the streets. Do you have a piece of the Bristol parade route?
Sorry?
Do you have a piece of the Bristol parade route?
Yes, yes. Almost the entire parade route is.
Wow, nice. It just made me think about it. But what are you hearing from your potential constituents, their priorities, their biggest challenges? What is frustrating them?
Oh, for sure. It's economic issues and the cost of things, be it housing, energy, healthcare. People are very, and just the inflation that they've been dealing with. They're very frightened, especially if they are on fixed incomes or seniors, and that is clearly the concern of the majority of folks that I've talked to. And I do believe. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, I'll let you finish, please.
No, I just think that if you look at every candidate will tell you exactly what I just said. So that's not going to separate us. Identifying the concerns of our constituents, we will agree on that. I think what we have to focus on, though, is how the candidates are going to differ in their responses on how to respond to those concerns. And I have the experience and the training to be able to have specific answers to how to proceed. And I don't believe that I'm seeing that in any of my opponents. And I'm also not seeing that they have thought deeply about some of the ways that we can help our citizens. And to the extent I could, at the town council level, we did work on the senior center, and that will be having a 50 plus affordable senior housing units built with it, because we partnered with Church Community Housing. As far as healthcare costs, I've been a leader in a 501c3 that's been advocating for Medicare for all single payer, but that has also meant that I've written the draft legislation that is proposing to take a closer look at how we've privatized Medicaid. Now, you'll always hear state politicians saying Medicaid's a huge issue because it does take up 25% of our budget, and let's cut it. Well, okay. In the past, what that's meant is cutting services, and 1 out of 4 Rhode Islanders have some amount of their care coming through Medicaid. So when you're cutting services, you're really hurting a huge swath of people, including many, many seniors and children. And my feeling is that if you look at how the middlemen, the private insurance companies who have been tasked with running about 90% of the Medicaid program are functioning, you will see that there's tremendous opportunities for wasting taxpayer money. They get $1.7 billion a year to run our Medicaid system. Connecticut has looked at their privatization of Medicaid and found that by bringing it back to a state-run system, they saved hundreds of millions of dollars per year and have better services. So that's a specific way I think that we can start to control the costs that my constituents are facing. And I believe that you need to have people who will not just identify problems, who's had experience trying to deal with those problems successfully, and also has ideas and proposed legislation to help us cut those costs without harming our constituents.
So I'd like to focus on healthcare a little bit. We've had
Sure.
a revolving door when it comes to the director of health in Rhode Island. We've had the potential merger, and I put that in quotes, of Lifespan and Care New England rejected by the Attorney General. We had before that negotiations between Care New England and partners, now Brigham and Women's, in Boston, one of the premier healthcare organizations in the world. Um, we have well, you wrinkle your eyes, but Brigham and Women's includes Brigham and Women's, Mass Eye and Ear, Dana Farber, clearly one of the premier healthcare organizations. Um, we have um, we have some neighborhood health centers around the state that many look at as an area that can fill some of the void. How do we fix this system?
Well, the system is broken because not so much on the care provider side, and that's the side that most people focus on. It's on the finance side that it's broken. How do we finance healthcare in this country? And the system that we currently have is what we call a multi-payer system. So there are patients, there are care providers, and in the middle are hundreds of health insurance companies and plans like Medicaid and Medicare or TRICARE or the VA system, which actually is an all-encompassing. So I'm confusing the system there, but let's just keep it patients, providers, and middlemen. And if you look at financially what's happening, the middlemen are becoming quite financially profitable, even through the pandemic. And yet, as you pointed out, our care providers are in financial distress. Our hospitals are having to merge because they are under financial distress. And most of the time, they describe the reason for that as a bad payor mix, meaning that they have too many Medicaid patients. And you have to have a system, as is the system in all the other industrialized countries in the world, where there is a single payer, And then you potentially gain 1/3 of every dollar we currently spend for healthcare, going back to actual healthcare providers rather than the middlemen who just take money from one set of folks and hand it to the other. There are even another issue that's concerned me is something called pharmacy benefit managers. They are sort of the middlemen for the middlemen. They control your pharmacy benefits, right? And even Republican-led states are going after them because they are way overcharging taxpayers through Medicaid payments they're accepting, as well as patients, by basically limiting the pharmaceuticals that you're able to get and walking away with the profits. So I think, Frank, what I'm saying is that the system needs to be fundamentally changed. And yes, of course, it would be better to do it at the federal level. However, there are steps that can be taken at the state level. And I would direct you to our website, rihealthcare.org, where you can click on legislation and see the kind of legislation that I would be pursuing. I frankly drafted three of those. So as far as, I'm sorry, am I answering your question?
You are, and it's part of it also is the survival of these healthcare facilities. Bob Urcioli, who had been president of Roger Williams Hospital many years ago, had mapped out this vision that each of our institutions would have a specialty. You would have a cardiac hospital, you have an oncology hospital, you would have a geriatric hospital, all of them doing some sort of general kind of stuff. But by specializing, they would attract some of the very best in their fields to be able to working at those hospitals. I don't know whether, I don't think anybody's talked about that kind of vision, but I wonder if anybody's looking at our overall healthcare system to see how we can make it better.
Right. Again, and just going back, I wasn't wrinkling my face as even suggesting that, the healthcare systems you're naming were not absolutely top ranked. There certainly are. But again, you have to look at this, and you're bringing up the second side I was talking about, which is this provision of services. That's different than the way we fund things. And so the focus that we've taken through Physicians for a National Health Program, which is the organization that my husband, Dr. J. Mark Ryan, is the president of in Rhode Island, they are focusing on the funding side. Like, where is the money coming from that funds healthcare services? The side that you're talking about is how do we provide those services? Frankly, I don't feel discuss that as much, but that is, so I won't. But again, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't conveying any sense that I wasn't, that I was in some ways criticizing the healthcare providers that you were mentioning. They're top notch.
Linda, I'm wondering, with your environmental experience as well as your experience on Portsmouth Town Council, I don't think many people on southern Aquidneck Island and many people in Rhode Island will soon realize that it's not long now where we will see windmills from the island. And a lot of talk in Portsmouth, and I think it's only Portsmouth, and it's only some of Portsmouth. I don't know why this is so quiet, but there is a big old wind turbine cable that needs to find its way somewhere, somehow, to these. And how do we move forward here without disturbing anybody and keeping everybody safe at the same time?
Right. Well, it's in the very early stages. You're talking about Mayflower Wind.
Yes.
They have many steps that they have to pass through before their project is approved. And we are only starting to get details about what they would like to do. And we don't even know much about what the options are. And we in Portsmouth have specifically hired additional legal and experts to help us represent our interests at the PUC. And so, yes, it is an important issue. But, I think a couple things that we've seen recently because of the severe weather events have to give us some guidance. One of those things is that I know there's a big concern about the energy prices being raised by the PUC recently. And one of the communities in Rhode Island that is not going to face those kind of energy increases is Block Island. And part of the reason for that, in fact, maybe the entire reason for that, is that they have tremendous amounts of wind energy. And so they're not going to have the increased energy costs that we'll be seeing. And the second thing is what's happening in Florida. I believe there was a community that was able to be very much created so that it would be resilient and withstand the last hurricane. So they'd never lost power. And they had relatively little damage compared to the rest of the folks right around them. So, is green energy a potential way of keeping costs down? Yes. Is trying to become more resilient something that could save lives? Absolutely, yes. And I think the people who try to dismiss green energy out of hand, or who try to dismiss any efforts to acknowledge that there's sea level rise and storm damage that we have to protect ourselves from, is really not who you want to represent you at the State House. And I certainly have done my work at the town level to try to address those specific issues. So I did write a grant application for Resilient Rhody, and we were one of the first municipalities to get a Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank grant. It was like for $339,000, and it was to do work to help with flooding in the areas of Island Park and Common Fence Point. And so again, I feel like I do a lot of work. I feel like I could do more work at the state level. And I also believe that I'll bring up a broader topic that's been coming up at the doors, which is, there's so much conflict between everyone. How are we going to move forward? And I will tell you this, that when I was a parent and raising my children, I had neighbors taking care of the most precious thing in my life, right? My kids. And I knew that those folks would pick my kids up on time. They would make sure they were wearing a coat when it was cold outside. They would feed them snacks so they wouldn't be hungry. I never asked them what their political views were, just in general. And I think maybe is that the way women roll? I don't know, but you find a goal and you find people that you know share that goal and you can work towards it and you cannot be distracted by political name calling or theoretical differences. And so I offer that hope to people who will send me to the State House that I can work with people across the political spectrum. And number two, what I'm finding knocking at the doors, and I'm hitting a lot of people who are unaffiliated, so they can be very conservative, that if we talk way up here and sort of name call, we will never agree. But if you talk about specific legislation, specific lines, and you go through the pros and cons, we have probably 75, 80% agreement. We really do. And I use this term Venn diagram at a recent forum, and someone said, and actually it was the host who said, never heard that term being used, but I mean, basically it just means there's a circle of things that you would like to do and a circle of things that other people want to do. And they're not just completely separate circles. They have a section of intersection when you put them together. And I do believe that that's the case. And that as long as we can try not to be distracted by folks who want to distract us, and I'm not sure why, but if you can remain focused on those goals and go through specific pieces of legislation, there is a tremendous overlap. And I want to ring that bell because that's hope right there. And it can happen.
What do you see as the state's role in trying to curb inflation? In Connecticut, they rolled back the gas tax. In Rhode Island, the governor decided not to do that. Gas prices going back up again. Is that one potential way, or are there other ways that,
I don't know if we right. I don't know at the state, there's so many causes of inflation, that are not within the control of the state, be it the war in Ukraine, our dependence on foreign oil. But I do believe that I have a certain view of the economic policies of the state that I think people should understand. And that is, number one, we need to stop, we need to reverse the 2006 tax cuts that were given to the wealthy. There was a theory, unproven, that there would be a trickle-down effect when you give rich people, and that's defined as people making over $450,000 a year. If you give them a tax break, that somehow it would benefit the whole state. But all that actually happened is that the state got less money. And that meant that the money they gave to municipalities also shrank. That meant in order to pick it up, municipalities like Portsmouth had to raise property taxes. And that is essentially, by cutting taxes on the wealthy, you basically shifted taxes to the middle class. And so that's something that I think should be addressed. And we should also not waste money at the state level. And again, that's something that all political candidates will say, but I specifically believe that we have got to stop giving tax breaks to companies that don't really benefit Rhode Islanders, be it the Superman building, be it to corporations that just take these breaks that have no strings attached and leave. We have to stop corporate welfare. And I also
do you include in that the soccer stadium in Pawtucket?
I do. I'm afraid I do. I don't know. Maybe someone could talk me out of that by showing me all the pros, but it didn't seem to make sense to do that when there are really wealthy investors who are coming in and just want help. I feel like if we give any benefits to something like that, it should be something that just cannot turn into profits for the that go into the pockets of wealthy investors. If we built infrastructure, if we did things that helped the community that could not be taken away, even if they left, that, which is what other states do. They have strings tied and much more non take it away with you kind of breaks given to companies. I might be willing to consider that.
Linda, one of the ways that people are thinking of that they could save taxpayers' money is through school regionalization, we have that question going on in Newport. School district regionalization, we have that question going on in Newport and Middletown. How close are you keeping an eye on that as a Portsmouth taxpayer, Portsmouth Town Councilor, possible state senator here? Do you think there's potential in the future for more of this across the state?
Well, I mean, it's not like regionalization hasn't happened at some levels. There's economies of scale. And I know that in Portsmouth, our school district works with other school districts to try to get a better price, because it's not just one little town buying something. They buy it for a region. And so there are ways to regionalize things without having a regionalized school system completely. I'm not sure, because the question only involves Middletown and Newport. I haven't been following it super closely, but I know that what is important about education funding that's going to come up right away is that the education funding formula has run out and they're about to redo it. And I know that the Senate has been having hearings about, what's the best way to rejigger that funding formula, which determines how much money the state gives to each of the municipalities for education. And I did go to a couple of those hearings that Senator Pearson was holding, just to try to understand a little bit better what the issues were. I know from a town perspective, certainly the inner city schools will have to have more funding than the wealthier suburban schools. However, I want to make sure that certain costs are properly included. For example, Portsmouth really suffered because we had huge transportation costs that are not included in the funding formula as being something that should be reimbursed to the towns. So, it's really has so many moving parts, and really so many things that you have to weigh. But you need someone who will be willing to sit there and really be a wonk about it and try to get a good school funding formula put together that is fair and that covers costs so that all the kids in the state are able to flourish.
I just wanted to switch to one other subject real quickly, and that's affordable housing. And whether you think we're doing enough or whether we need to do more in order to take care of the needs.
Yeah, so we, again, on a really tiny scale, tried to increase affordable housing in Portsmouth by doing the senior center project, which will add 50 new units. I know that in Bristol, I just visited the Franklin Court assisted living facility, and they also have a independent living facility next door, and they were funded. It's such an amazing thing. I think a few individuals started the effort to get this. I think there are 100 people on each side of that going. There was federal funding. They didn't really rely on state and municipal funding to do that. And I'm only just starting to learn about it. But there are programs that we could be instituting to try to amp up more affordable housing. And I just have not gotten into it enough to really get into super details, but I do believe that when you see projects like Franklin Court or what we're doing at the Portsmouth Senior Center, there is hope that progress can be made. I was told actually that a lot of the funding is being cut back that allowed the Franklin Court facilities to be developed, but we can try to see if we can have that happen and increase the funding for it.
Is that funding state or federal?
It was federal. It was federal.
Linda, what are you most proud about on your time in Portsmouth Town Council?
I think it's that we have managed to retain excellent staff, just unbelievably great staff. Our town administrator, who has in turn hired this great police chief and fire chief, and we are the only community on Aquidneck Island to have an emergency management director. Just really, really good staff who have done things like, when I first joined, there was no rolling capital improvement plan, mainly because no one had bothered to do an analysis of all the town capital assets. But our town administrator undertook that study and put together a rolling capital improvement plan. And what that prevented as well as allowed. Okay, so what it prevented was for random projects to suddenly appear and be funded. And, so for example, we did spend quite a bit of money for something called the Brown House. And that I'm not sure would have been the top priority for how money's spent. And also what it's allowing us to do is to stop something called deferred maintenance. When you defer maintenance on something, a building doesn't fall down immediately, but it does allow people in office to pretend that, oh, here's some money, we'll keep the taxes lower with it. When in fact, what they're doing is allowing buildings to decay. And so because we've had this analysis, because we now have a rolling capital improvement plan that addresses the needs of the buildings, we're not going to be able to have, frankly, fake tax breaks being given based on deferred maintenance. And so we have excellent town management. So I guess what I'm most proud of is that we were able to hire and keep these folks. And I'll tell you that it was not a majority, it was not a unanimous decision to keep in place all our staff. And that's another reason why it's really important for folks when we're voting to make sure that we keep the Democrats who have been able to manage the town so well.
Linda, was there anything else that we didn't get to that you wanted to bring up today?
Only to say that I have really found it a privilege to be able to talk to so many people at the doors. I always learn so much, and I'm always so inspired because there are people who are just very quietly doing such amazing work, taking care of sick relatives or just juggling all the things that people have to juggle these days, job and family and everything. And it just, I know that I am privileged to be able to spend the time to run for office and be able to talk to folks. And I really, really want people to understand that I appreciate their time and they should continue to reach out to me if they have concerns and questions or suggestions. There's so much knowledge in the community, especially from the retired folks. I want to hear what you have to say. You can find me at UJIFUSA, 4, and you'll find my telephone number and my email address. Please reach out. I always answer. And so I just want to thank everybody for this privilege. And I hope you vote because top to bottom, it's so important this election, who you put in office.
Excellent. And I will give you credit for including your contact information and email while speaking, because normally I have to ask about it and sometimes I forget. So I appreciate you including that today. Linda, we wish you the very best of luck. People start voting tomorrow in Rhode Island and over the next couple of weeks. So we wish you the very best of luck, and we hope to talk to you again real soon.
Yeah. Thanks for being with us, Linda.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Ryan, for holding these things. I know it's like herding cats to try to get everybody scheduled, and it
is a challenge.
It is herding cats, and it doesn't matter if it's a D, an R, or an I. It's it's interesting. So, but it's our pleasure, and it's so great to get to chat with people and get to know them, whether they win, lose, or draw over the next couple of weeks. It's great to be able to chat with people from all across the state. So,
we
wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
All right. And that's going to conclude this interview. If you would like to watch it again, share it with your friends, rewatch it. It's all available on whatsupnuke.com. You can see our full interview schedule there, as well as much more. So whatsupnuke.com, and it's available to watch, or it's available in just a short while. It'll be available as well as a podcast. So if you're on the run, if you're driving around, if you're running errands, going to vote, tune in. And we could bring you all the information, we could bring you the interviews, but we can't make you watch these or listen to these or share these. So you got to do a little bit of that on your own. Vote.ri.gov. You can go visit your sample ballot. You can see full list of candidates, as well as all of the questions on the back, the local and statewide questions. That's going to do it for this one. Whatsupnuke.com for the latest. Thanks for watching.